Welcome back to GA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I'm here with Pól Seoige from Gurta 47. We're here to preview the Mayo and Tipperary game. We will touch on the Dublin and Cavan game a little bit as well, and obviously we'll discuss some of the other big factors that was being discussed across GA in the past week or so. So yeah, I suppose first of all, Paul, I can see in a fancy car there anyway. So a bit surprised.
Thanks,
I mean, I didn't know they sold them a Mayo.
Yeah, they do. Mayo is, the GDP has gone up there in the last couple of years. It's we're flying. We're flying these days. I didn't want to miss out on the interview, Aaron. We had a great chat last time. We had a strongman competition in Ontario, and I was sponsoring a couple of the Irish guys with some Girth 47 gear. So we had Adam in the open weight category. He done really, really well. Warren in the 105 kg category, and I was in the under 90 category. So we placed well. It was a tough competition, and it's very humbling to be among giants. But no, we were flying the Irish flag nonetheless, and I didn't want to miss out on the chance to give some analysts on the upcoming All Ireland semi-finals with Cavan Dublin and Tipperary versus the green over the red. But delighted to be back on GA Fan TV.
So I suppose, Paul, obviously the last time you were on the podcast, we were obviously discussing the possibility of the championship being cancelled, and I remember you were saying that you felt that obviously, at the time, with given the whole circumstances in the world with the coronavirus and whatnot, that you were thinking the championship should be cancelled. I know obviously you're based in Toronto at the moment, so you probably haven't seen as many games maybe as you would have liked because of the time gap. But I suppose, what have you made of the championship so far in the end, I suppose, with the fact that it has gone ahead?
Look, it's great the championship has gone ahead because it's produced some very special results. Obviously, Cavan winning the Ulster for the first time since 1997 was very, very special. People talked about Mayo winning Connacht for the first time in 5 years, because Connacht has been so competitive, and it's fantastic because it was seen as a weaker province for a long time. So Mayo are back on their throne there. Over in Leinster, there was no surprises. You know what I mean? So it wasn't as much to talk about in that respect. So it was business as usual. But down in Munster, I mean, it was absolutely class. For people on the outside, I suppose they would have seen it as a bit of a shock win. But you have to remember that Tipperary team are the famous minor team that won the All Ireland back in 2011, and obviously they've a few of the older players in the last couple of years that have come up against Mayo in 16 especially, and they overcame Cork because they just had their game plan down against Cork, and they just wanted a lot more. The fact that it was on a very special weekend with the commemoration of Bloody Sunday. You had, Michael Hogan was on the shoulders of the literally on the shoulders of the Tipperary jerseys. It was a very emotional affair. They had their changed strip back to, a 1920s style strip, and everything went in their favor, and their good players played well, and they came away with a great result. And it was a very momentous and special occasion, first time in 85 years, and when days like that happen, to get back to your question, that's what means that's what would have been missing if the championship didn't go ahead. If the championship had gone ahead under normal circumstances, maybe this might have happened anyways. But the fact that it's been squeezed together and it's gone ahead the way it has gone, it's produced some amazing results. Kilkenny are out in the hurling as another example, and you've got two kind of crowd favorite teams in the hurling All Ireland as well. So it has still produced the goods. What I went back to about saying that the championship shouldn't have gone ahead earlier on was that because there was so many different stories and different breaking pointers of what might happen and what might not happen, and we're still playing this COVID game and we're not playing it, and we're wearing the masks and taking them back off again. The main reason behind not running it was that you could have restructured your organization, you could have restructured your clubs and intercounty setup, and come back in a more stronger position in 2021, because everyone needs to restructure and improve on the weaknesses before. And the fact that the year was almost done, and you're getting into winter football and playing in bad pitches and bad weather, it would have made more sense at the time. And the other element is the fact that GAA fans are not armchair supporters like your soccer fans, your baseball fans and basketball fans. Just use some examples where they sit at home and kind of consume the game. In Ireland and in the GA, we consume the game, but we also put our shoulder to the wheel as well. And we also give a lot of time to each of our clubs and our counties. And also, if it's not that, it's monetary benefits too that will go into, buying raffle tickets, and it'll go into like buying pieces of memorial walls, for example, in stadiums or wherever else to give back to the organization. So it's not an armchair organization, which means that for the GA juggernaut to keep going, you need to have half the country involved as well to help you along the way. And, if we were trying to stop the whole COVID virus, well, then that would have meant, sealing that for this year and moving on. It's not like, for example, in the NBA where you can have these massive camps based out of Disneyland or something like that to run off the competitions. So we are where we are. It's produced some great games, but it's produced some situations that make very, very little sense to me. For example, the fact that the extended panel can't even travel to the games if you're involved with teams, which makes very, very little sense to me, because you're in a stadium that can potentially hold from Crow Park up to about 82,000 people, and other stadiums can hold, depending on 25 to 40,000 people, depending on what stadium you're at. And you can't bring another 10 lads along with you that have helped drive on their respective teams all year, in the sweat and in the dirt, and to get the teams that far, they have to watch it at home as well. That's a bit of an odd one. So, it has thrown up some upsets. I think the good side of running this old style knockout championship is the fact that the excitement is obviously paramount, because every game is a final, but it's really proven the point that not to go back to the knockout style championship, but to have it, the fact that the Super 8s completely just disappear and die off, along with everything else that's died off that's been bad in the last while. So the Super 8s would hopefully disappear, but you would still have a round robin situation where you have a second chance, because if teams train so hard and prepare so hard and come up against maybe a stronger team or get unlucky on the day, all that effort is gone in one game. So I think what this championship has shown us, that the four best teams of the country are left, because they wouldn't be there in any other way. And I firmly believe that this time around, because they've played every game like a final, and that's why they're there. But also the fact that I think it will finally put an end to the Super 8s, which was a joke, because you can't have a championship where you go back into a league format and then finish off in championship again. These are amateur players at the end of the day. Yes, it's a professional place that they're in, but it's still an amateur game. So hopefully they'll be looking at all these points and be seeing the fact that it's still worked out in a way. I think the weather has been a great factor in the fact that the games haven't been that hindered by bad weather at the time. So therefore, there's been very good football, especially with teams like Mayo and Tipp early playing. They like to play a certain brand of football that suits them on a fine day. So with the Dubs playing at Crow Park, obviously that will suit the Dubs, but I think Cavan will relish the fact they get the chance to play there too, albeit without their fantastic supporters. But things will be resumed back to normal, I think, and when the semis resume, it's at a strange.
It's been pretty exciting, and you are where you are. The championship did go ahead, and it's entertained the people. It's the players that have gone through the mill, but we are where we are, and it's exciting times ahead.
Yeah. And I suppose getting on to what you're saying earlier, I definitely agree with you. And you were saying about like a lot of counties not being able to bring their extended panel, like especially with the fact that it's obviously a lot of those players that fringe players and squad players that essentially put in the work for the starting 15. So I think like definitely, especially for the games in Crow Park, they should definitely be able to join like without a doubt, because like they obviously put in as much work as the starting 15. Like what have you made of this Mayo team in general this year? Obviously you kind of alluded to it there, like winning their first Connacht title in 5 years. Like what have you made of them from what you've seen of them anyway?
Honestly, I think James Horn has done a fantastic job, because whether we like it or not, this Mayo team is in transition, and the younger players that have been brought in and the players that have switched around positions throughout the whole year, in big games against the likes of Roscommon and Galway especially, really have done a job. And it's at a stage in the Mayo team where I think Conor Loftus, for example, was interviewed there during the week, and he said that you just don't know where you stand some of the times, where there's such bite and there's such appetite there between the players, and they're very even keel of players that they're all ready to fill any position possible. And I think Conor Loftus himself is a very fitting tribute to that, becoming a bit of a midfield maestro. And he's not the biggest man in the world, but he works very, very well with Matthew Rowan in the middle. And it's working out for Mayo. Mayo are very dynamic, and they've players that can be very fluid in the game. Lee Keegan, a cornerback, is a perfect example of that. You know, his nemesis, Jeremy Connolly's retired, and Lee Keegan is still there. And Lee Keegan is there for a reason, that he's still there to win in All Ireland, and he's shown his versatility in at the cornerback position, but also he's able to get up and down the field at the same time. I think some of the players have been phenomenal. The likes of Tommy Conroy coming in as well, great player. McLaughlin, great player. He's actually a cyclist that just took back up football a couple of years ago, and he's using a lot of the traits that he's brought in the cyclist game to Gaelic football, and he's just an athletic guy that has just got a massive tenacity to win as well. So there's been a lot of surprises in the Mayo team, and a lot of them have been good surprises too. You know, Aidan O'Shea obviously has gone back into the full forward position, and he's winning a lot of ball in there, and he's very kind of playing a game like Michael Murphy up in Donegal, and it's working well. He's feeding the players around him. Cillian O'Connor's back to his best form. You've got David Clark being very solid there in the the first line of defence. Like there's just a very balanced Mayo setup, and I think there's less panic around the Mayo team this year. So I think all in all, things are going well.
Mm. And do you think, like, even because I remember we were talking before when we were saying how Mayo coming into the championship this year, a lot of people were saying that they're almost in transition, and players are leaving, players are retiring, and the team is getting older, and they've kind of missed this. This great team has missed an opportunity to win an All-Ireland. Do you think that in a weird way that's actually helped this Mayo team in some ways, because they're actually bringing in new players like Mark Moore and like Owen McLaughlin, and those players don't have any fear, and the fact that they were, no one really considered them as threats to the All-Ireland before a ball was kicked. So do you think that lack of pressure has actually helped them coming into the All-Ireland Championship this year?
I think so too, and remember, a lot of that team are part of the 2016 winning team as well. So there is a confidence there, and there is a massive hunger there as well. That the current Mayo team, if you're good enough, you're old enough. You know what I mean? So there seems to be a very kind of transparent selection process with James Horn, where he lets the players know whether you're in or out this weekend, and some very seasoned players that have many all-stars. That are not starting and probably won't be starting against Tipperary. And honestly, it's very hard to get away, as a Mayo supporter, but there's a coolness and a calmness and a collectiveness of the Mayo team that has to be admired. And I know well that of the 4 teams left, people are back in Dublin, but Mayo have no fear, and more than likely will be Tipp and will be facing off Dublin in the final. Would it be absolutely phenomenal as a neutral if Cavan bet Dublin and Tipperary bet Mayo? Yeah, it would. And 2020 is the year that upsets like that can happen, and who knows? I know for a fact that both games, Cavan and Dublin and Tipperary and Mayo, will be tight games, because that Tipperary team have been building for a long time. Their manager went in there in 2011 first, and then went to Wexford, and then he's come back again. And there's a great collectiveness there with the team, so they'll be quietly confident against Mayo too.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. They've definitely had some close battles with Mayo down the years, even going back to the 2016 All-Ireland semi-final, and even recently in a few qualifier meetings as well. Like, what are your overall thoughts on this Tipperary team? Like, what ways do you think they might actually be able to hurt Mayo, I suppose?
Well, I mean, like David Power, who was there in 2011 when they bet Dublin in their minor title, That was a great Dublin team, for like said, Jeff McCaffrey, Cormac Costello involved as well. And the reason they're going to be confident is that they're an All-Ireland winning team too. Yeah, they come with the stigma of, Tipperary being a hurling stronghold, which it is. And you could nearly say that Mayo are going to be playing Clonmel the next day. That's how, a tightly nipped and the geographical area of where all the footballers come from in Tipperary. But that brings a massive collectiveness and a bond to that Tipperary team that have very little fear too. They've got excellent players obviously as well. The likes of Quinlivan, Fox, Sweeney. Obviously that score he scored against Limerick. That's a score for the ages. You know what I mean? And that's a score where they win against a team they were favored to win against. But they do it as a big team. They have that just one bit of excellence that just stands out against a weaker team and deservedly get the win out of it. So the Mayo Tip game will be a dogfight. It'll be very, very tight. And remember, back in 2016, it was as a Mayo supporter, it was a very silly black card that got Tipperary on the back foot from the very, very beginning. And who knows, if that black card didn't happen, how tightly that game would have gone. Maybe Tipperary would have nipped us in the end. I don't know. And I hope nothing like that comes around this time around to ruin the game, So I think it's going to be very tight. Obviously, I'm going to go with Mayo, but it's going to be a very, very tight game. And Tipperary, they have a massive confidence to them, and they have a record, and they have a structure there for the last 10, 15 years that's been put in place by the Tipperary County Board, and it's been ran very, very professionally. And people down in Tipperary and players the likes of Fox, for example, they've noticed that there's been a massive switch this time around where the full county hurlers and all have become massive football ambassadors and wishing well to the football team and really getting behind the football team. And it's as I said, it's a county football team with a select few of maybe like about 4 clubs max represented in that whole panel, but yet the whole county's got behind them. And I think Tipperary have a lot going for them this time around.
Yeah, definitely. Like even when David Power came out in the interview after, and he was saying he was talking about like how this is probably going to help Tipperary for the next 10 to 20 years. And I even think the fact that the hurlers were knocked out the day before against Galway, that might have even in a weird kind of way, I know no Tipperary man or woman even wants Tipperary to lose in either in all grades of sport in Gaelic games, but I actually think that could help the footballers a little bit, the fact the hurlers were knocked out the day before, because the amount of support that's going to be behind the footballers now coming into this game against Mayo, like, and they won't have any fear at all. Like, no one really gave them a chance going into that Cork game. I had a sneaky feeling they might be able to pull that off, just because they're a team that does have a lot of really, really quality forwards in the likes of Sweeney and Quinlivan. And the Cork team were essentially just a very young team that on a given day happened to cause a massive shock and beat Kerry. Any other day Kerry probably would have won that game. But yeah, like what do you make of yourself? Is that maybe the only worry maybe from a Mayo fan when you've seen Cork get caught the way in that game against Tipperary, that maybe Mayo might be caught, because Mayo haven't really had pressure at all in the championship, but I feel like there will be a little bit of pressure going into this, just for the fact that, like, if they were to lose to Tipperary, I know for a fact you're going to have Joe Brawley and everyone's going to be coming out again and doing their usual sing-song, which I don't agree with, by the way, that Mayo or this or Mayo or that. But like, what do you make of yourself?
Remember that Liam Cairns done a great job as well before David Power, and he built a great team that, for example, they ended up losing players like Stephen O'Brien, that ended up going back to the hurlers. Didn't work out with him with the hurlers, then went back to the footballers again, and now he's playing phenomenal with the footballers too. And David Power had been there before that, and now has come back in again. And it's kind of similar to the James Horn situation. And I think they're a very similar style of manager, where they've both been successful in an underage capacity. So the way I see it is that the game's going to be super tight, because they're two very, very balanced teams. Mayo are the favourites, and Tipperary are going to use the fact that they're underdogs as an advantage as well, because there's no pressure on Tipperary. There is more pressure on Mayo. Mayo, I kind of disagree with you in a way. I feel they still have had a tough year getting here, because at the end of the day, Roscommon and Galway are two very, very good teams, and you could argue that for example, Cork got lucky against Kerry to get into that Munster final. But look, you can only win what's in front of you. There's been many successful teams, Kerry and Dublin to be included in that often got lucky with the bounce of a ball, and you need that to win anything too, and Tipperary might need a bit of luck to beat Mayo, and in the other semi-final, Cavan need a lot of luck to beat Dublin too. But I think the main masterstroke with Tipperary was getting Colin O'Riordan back in from Oz. That was a masterstroke because obviously he's a great footballer. You could tell by his speech at the end of the game how much it meant to him. But the other fact was the fact that how he gelled back in with the Tipperary team. Obviously, he had played with these lads before too, but he gelled back in with the team, and he was a massive kind of boost to the team at the right time, almost like a Peter Canavan boost to Tyrone back in the day. It's the same sort of vibe, and he's now available obviously for the semi-final too. And I think last time around in 2016 when they met in the semi-final, Tipperary mightn't have had those little tricks up their sleeve. With the likes of O'Riordan in, it gives Quinlivan kind of more of a role to be a forward and be a scorer, and obviously Conor Sweeney to work off that as well. And with players like that playing well, you got Brian Fox as well. When players like that playing well, I think Tipperary have a great chance. So what really kind of bugged me was the fact that with this Tier 2 championship that was again been floated around before, two semi-finalists, Cavan and Tipperary, would have ended up being put into a different tier. You know what I mean? Because they're so-called weaker teams. They're not weaker teams. The four semi-finalists are there for a reason. The best four teams in Ireland right now, and whichever way they won it, they won it. And sometimes you get lucky and you get there, but I believe they're the four strongest teams left. Yeah, there's been a few shocks, but that's what you're dealing with right now, and Tipperary deserve to be there and are as proud and as confident as any other team left. So I believe both games are going to be tight. I believe even the Dublin game is going to be tight because Cavan have absolutely nothing to lose because it's been so long since they've featured there. It's a long time. So look, it's all to play for. It's excitement. It's very unorthodox. The time of year, it depends on the conditions of what's going to happen on the day too, weather-wise, because that can swing a couple of scores here and there as well.
Yeah, I think we've been very lucky so far, in all honesty, with the weather. Like, we haven't really had anything. Like, funny enough, actually, during the National League back in January, February, we had much worse weather. There was games getting called off, there was games getting postponed, and although it has been freezing, like, from time to time, like, generally speaking, like, the weather is, like, it's held up brilliantly. I suppose moving on to that Dublin and Cavan game, like, just to touch on that, I suppose, for a little bit, like, I suppose I'd imagine you would be expecting Dublin to win that. I mean, like you were saying there, you expect it to be a bit tight, but I don't know. Like, personally, I feel like I definitely want it to be, even as a Dublin fan myself, like, I don't want it to be a whole whitewash like what the Meath result was. But I do actually think that Meath, like, I think on the day, psychologically playing the Dubs, like, I think they're a much better team than they played on that day. And I do think Cavan will certainly give Dublin quite a test. It won't be as bad as what it was against Meath. Like, I couldn't see Cavan getting hammered by 20 points or anything like that. But how do you see the game playing out yourself?
So obviously the Cavan and Dublin game, it's going to be an exciting encounter, and I totally appreciate where you're coming from, that the Leinster final didn't live up to any of the Leinster finals in the past, even the famous one that Meath put five goals past Dublin, like, because it was a bit of excitement, This time round in the semi-final, look, Cavan have absolutely nothing to lose. A few years ago, Donegal had nothing to lose against Dublin, and it was quoted as one of the worst games played in Croke Park ever. But Donegal tried to get a result out of the players that they had. So Cavan will more than likely do the same thing. And, like, listen, they have a very all-rounded, tight, competitive team, led by a great manager as well. And, like, he proved it on the club scene as well. So honestly, I believe he does some sort of trick up his sleeve against Dublin. Obviously, they're clear underdogs, but they're not going to get the results that the Meath got, because they're going to approach the game completely differently, because they have absolutely nothing to lose at all, and they have a quiet confidence of coming out of Ulster, which is the most competitive province in Ireland, and therefore you're the best team, one of the best teams in Ireland if you come out of Ulster as champions. Whether it's a shock win or not, you're still one of the best teams because it just has a higher standard of competitiveness than any other province, including Connacht.
Mm. And obviously there's been a lot of discussion in the past few weeks about Dublin, and there was John Connellan who came out with an open letter saying, Dublin receive, quite an extortionate amount of funding, which, as a Dublin fan myself, I'll admit fully to it. Like, I think anyone who denies it, obviously isn't living in the whole world. I do think there's other factors as well that contribute to the whole scenario, but like obviously the whole Croke Park thing as well. There was some discussion around that, and maybe they should play the Dublin Cavan game in Navan, and they were saying other places or whatever. But like, what do you think personally?
Well, in terms of where the games are supposed to be played, I think an All-Ireland semi-final should always be played in Croke Park, and that's just the way it is. That's tradition, and I feel like, again, if the GA doesn't have traditional in a lot of parts of its game and its calendar, it kind of loses a lot of the meaning behind the association, especially, for example, it was great that Tipperary commemorated and Dublin commemorated the 1920 Bloody Sunday massacre, which obviously a lot of people didn't really know about. People involved in history knew about it, but now it's created a great awareness of some Irish history and Irish history that people should be proud of, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So, for example, the semi-final of 2014, when Mayo had to go to Limerick instead of Croke Park playing the replay, that was a disgrace, and that was bad organisation by the GA, because they should have foreseen something like that happening, and not to have American football high school team playing in our sacred Croke Park at that time. That made no sense. If you don't keep some structures in place and some cultural dates in place every year for the GA calendar year, for example, All-Ireland final hurling Sunday, All-Ireland final football Sunday, well then you don't really have a lot of culture and kind of meaning behind a lot of the events, and these are events. So an All-Ireland semi-final as an event should always be in Croke Park. It doesn't matter what teams are involved in it. I certainly believe that the underdogs in both games, which are Tipperary and Cavan, would prefer not to have the semi-finals rather, in Croke Park. But I firmly believe that it will be in Croke Park, and it should be. The situation a few years ago with the Newbridge or Nowhere with Kildare, that was completely different situation, and I firmly believe the Kildare manager was correct, and that did help Kildare, go forward that year, and Mayo were out.
Yeah, well, I suppose with the Kildare Mayo situation, like that was obviously in a qualifier, and I do remember that situation pretty well. Like it was a mad situation, and I suppose Kildare made massive use of the advantage. But I suppose it is good to hear that you were saying about keeping the traditions in Croke Park. I think, to be honest, the only reason why people are honestly questioning Croke Park for me is just because of the dominance of Dublin, and I think that's a different issue. That's funding, resources, money being spread out, throughout the entire other 31 counties of Ireland. I don't think anyone was really questioning Croke Park, the Croke Park situation back in 2007, 2008. I think even Mickey Hart and even, probably a lot, even Colin Cooper even used to say they used to love playing Dublin and Croke Park because it was where they used to love beating Dublin and Croke Park. They used to live for that every year. So, like personally, I think definitely, they should keep the, the semi-finals in Croke Park. And I'm not just saying that as a Dublin fan. I do honestly believe that, there's a lot of tradition there that goes into it. And they've always been there. I think in the past 30 years, there's only been one game, and the one you obviously referenced, the Mayo Kerry game, which, definitely shouldn't have been in the Gaelic grounds. Like that definitely should have been in Croke Park. I suppose if you were to give a prediction then, for both the Mayo Tipperary and Dublin Cavan game, what would you say?
Well, you want to end this crazy year with some crazy results, don't you? So if that was the case, you'd see there's a Cavan Tipperary final, and what a special day that would be. Obviously, I'm going to go with Dublin to beat Cavan. It would be brilliant if it was the other way around. And I'm going to say it's going to be an extremely tight game with Tipperary and Mayo, but Mayo will have they will have been there before, and they will have won there before, and they just have that bit of an edge over Tipperary in terms of big players, and big players that have won won the hearts of the country, and they've won All Stars, and they haven't won an All Ireland senior, but many of them have won them, whether minor or under 21. And even someone like Brian Cox, who's a great player and a servant for Tipperary, said that, if you're a GA man or a woman, that your second favorite team is Mayo. So Mayo have that all the time at their backing, and that's why I see Mayo going through to play the Dubs. And in all craziness, maybe actually lifted this year, Aaron. Mayo winning All Ireland with no crowd, that's something nearly out of a horror movie, to be honest with you. I don't know how that works.
Be the most 2020 thing ever, I think.
Oh my God! I don't know. I can't fathom it. I don't know if you'd be excited or going to cry, or maybe a bit of both. Maybe that's just a standard Mayo fans' attitude to any result. But it's going to be a strange one. And it's like any of the players that have been talking about this season that have just got on with it. It's still going to be marked down as another footballing or hurling season, but there's a kind of a strangeness to it. And I think without the fans, especially in Gaelic games, it just takes away a lot of the special, just the specialness that we have. Where, as I said, we're not armchair supporters in any shape or form. There's a lot more meaning to it, So that's kind of the sad part. And whoever wins the All Ireland this year, it'll be a quiet celebration, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I suppose with Mayo, like kind of when you were saying about it being a close game with Tipperary, I definitely do think that it might be a tight game, all right, because like on one hand side of the thing, I've a funny feeling that Tipperary might be a bit slow out of blocks in this game, just because of the fact that like when you look at what they've achieved, winning a Munster title for the first time in 85 years, I have a funny feeling that's almost like an All Ireland for them in many ways. And I think Mayo having a couple of weeks off, I think that will kind of stand to them pretty well, especially having gone through a number of intense games back to back. I think that would help them. So I'd have to go with Mayo as well. And for Dublin Cavan, like I still think there'll probably be 8 or 9 points in it. I've a funny feeling Dublin might have maybe a 13 to 14 point lead, and then Cavan will start getting a bit more comfortable and start kicking a lot of points late on, like they've done in a lot of the other games.
Yeah.
But, to be honest, like as I said before, I obviously want Dublin to win, but I definitely don't want it to be a 20 point mauling, because to be honest, I'm kind of getting fed up of the whole conversation about Dublin being too good and Dublin being this and Dublin being that, because I think if everyone keeps having that conversation, they'll never beat them. So
yeah.
So,
I mean, there's two schools of thought. Any team can be beaten on any day. That's the first school of thought, and the second school of thought is that we're a small island. We're roughly 4.5 million of a population. To have that amount of a population in one county, and it's structured around the lines of what was made up in Hayes Hotel in 1884 with the foundation of the GA, which may be another omen for Tipperary in the semi-final. Who knows? That it was made up on the parish structure, obviously, and Dublin was it was still a bigger place, but it wasn't the cosmopolitan city that it is today. Means that it is hard for it to make sense that you have that much of a population facing off against, as I said, a team like Cavan has a population of about 80,000, Mayo has a population of about 110. It's hard to kind of justify at times, and sooner rather than later, there will have to be a serious decision made, because as you see from looking at the Dublin Club Championships, there's some fantastic players in the Dublin Club Championship that you'll never see play county that would be well fit to make many a county team. So eventually the conversation will have to be had, especially if Dublin win an All Ireland, because it is getting to a stage of, well, how are they going to be beaten? And the idea of building Dublin up like they did over the last couple of years with different structures and funding and that, and the GA is at fault for doing that, is that now you've built something so big that it's losing a lot of interest, even an interest of the Dublin fans. So that's what makes it tough, because it's kind of been built up so well that it's kind of a train that just keeps on plowing through, and that can have a negative impact as well. And you can see that because people will be talking about the Tipperary victory for many years to come. Hopefully not as long as 85 years time, the Tipperary will be successful in between that. But you can also see it in the Cavan victory, for example. Even the fact of Mayo winning Connacht, it was actually a big deal because they haven't won it in 5 years, even though Mayo are seen as a pretty successful team. So it's refreshing to see what you're saying about you don't want a mauling of the All-Ireland semi-final. I totally agree with you. And most GA fans, especially Dublin fans, will be like that too, because, you know, sport is about competition, and you want to have competition in it. And rather than trying to come up with new tier structures, how about trying to figure out a way of kind of tackling the big elephant in the room that is known as, you know, the Dubs.
Yeah. Well, I suppose like definitely, I definitely wouldn't mind it being close with Cavan, but at the same time, it was nice to give Meath a bit of a battering, especially after, you know, they kind of talked the talk a little bit leading up to the week that it was going to be, you know, the closest Leinster challenge in, I don't know, 8-9 years. To be fair, I did think that, and I did say it on one of my shows, like I did think that Mayo or that Meath would give Dublin a decent go, but like Dublin are just a different animal. And I even think with Desi Farrell in there now as well, I think, you know, he's never won an All-Ireland as a manager. You know, he's won one as a player, but he's never won one as a manager, obviously. So, you know, he'll want to keep this train running, and he'll want to win an All-Ireland. And as Kieran Whelan said on RTE, like Dublin are going for the one in a row under Desi Farrell.
Yeah.
So, I do agree with you though at the same thing. You know, I do think at some point, obviously, the GA, they'll have to probably try come up with something to maybe try balance the playing field. I honestly don't know what they do, to be honest. I'm glad I'm not in their position anyway. You know, obviously John Connellan was saying that, you know, Dublin receive like 16 million in grants alone since like 2002, and then obviously all the other counties in Leinster haven't even received $1 million in that time, or all the other counties in Ireland. You know, but I do think at the same time that, like, specific to Leinster alone, I think a lot of those counties, for me anyway, they need to, because a lot of those counties have actually received more funding now than they did back in the 90s and 2000s. And obviously that's just because, you know, there's more money around now, and maybe with inflation and all that, maybe the cost doesn't add up. But at the same time, back then in the 90s and 2000s, you know, you had great Meath, Kildare teams, you had great Laois teams, you had great Westmeath teams. So I still think like a lot of those counties as well should probably look at their own county boards and think, you know, the money we do have, you know, are we spending it? You know, do we have our house in order? Because rather than consistently pointing the finger at the Dubs, which, look, listen, fair enough, they are miles ahead, and it probably has got a little ridiculous at times, but I do think at the same time, like with Dublin, with how they've used the money, how they've used the resources, the coaches they've got in place, I think it's been second to none, really. And I think it's all been part of a project, really, that started in the mid-2000s with, you know, the fact that obviously Croke Park was being redeveloped, and they needed Dublin to, you know, the GA needed Dublin as much as the Dublin needed GA because of obviously the population size, and rugby was taken off massively, and soccer as well. So I think that all kind of had a big part to do with it. But certainly, you know, the problem was they didn't realise how good Dublin were probably going to be. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, you know, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but.
So Aaron, I have a question for you. What do you think of the threat coming from just a little bit north of Dublin with Louth and Proud? Because Mickey Hart has taken no rest at all, and you know, he's taken over a team that in 2010 should have won a Leinster and were unfairly robbed, and they've been building since then. They've lost a couple of players and they've built again, and that man wouldn't take over a county that didn't have potential. So, you know, that could be Dublin's next rivalry. You never know. From the wee county.
Yeah, look, I mean, with Louth, like they're, you know, fully enough, I don't like where I live in Dublin. I actually don't live too far from Louth. I could actually probably get to Drogheda quicker than I could get to Dublin City because of the traffic and everything else. Like, but look, with Mickey Hart going in there, I mean, he's obviously a very, very experienced manager. You know, won 3 All-Irelands in his time. Like, he's one of the best managers in the GA without a doubt. you could argue, you know, obviously I don't want to get into a big debate of who's the best manager in Gaelic football. I know Jim Gavin probably comes into the equation and Mick O'Dwyer, but I think also at the same time, like with Mickey Hart, like he's come into a county that never won an All Ireland, and he made them powerhouses in the All Ireland. And was this narrative? Exactly. There was a narrative around, there was a narrative around Tyrone as well that they played awful and they played, you know, puke football and whatnot. But I don't think they did. Like, I've often gone back and seen the highlight reels of Owen Mulligan and Peter Canavan and Brian Dooher and these guys, like, and they're phenomenal footballers. They were ahead of their time in many ways, but like when you seen the size of them, like physically, they were built like machines, you know. And I think it's something that even Dublin have probably looked at, because Dublin nowadays are, you know, they're all big, bulky lads, like so. So yeah, like I think he'll do a great job with Louth, without a doubt. He'll definitely push them up a bit. You know, it'd be interesting to see how long he stays there. Like, he's a 3-year deal. I'd imagine it would probably take, you know, if he's going to be successful with Louth, it would have to take at least 3 years before they're really pushing.
Yeah, of course,
Leinster, you know. But I don't know. I would have to wait and see. But they'll definitely improve quite a lot. And Samuel Roy is one of the best forwards in the country, so they'll definitely be there or thereabouts, you know, in the coming years in terms of at least being competitive anyway. But at least like that kind of ties into my point of what I was saying earlier as well. Like, at least their county board they're addressing the problem. You know, they're going out, they're getting the best manager that they can get. They're getting their house in order. They're getting their structures in order. And yeah, it wouldn't even surprise me now, because if they got up there with the likes of Kildare and Meath anyway, because you know, certainly the Leinster Championship's in a weird position at the moment. The gap between maybe Meath and even going down to Wicklow. I know Meath hammered Wicklow in a game, but I honestly don't think the gap between them is that big at the moment.
No. I think for example, Wicklow just had a bad day. I think it's just the gap between Dublin and everyone else in Leinster, and that's the gap that they're trying to, you know, close. I think someone like Mickey Hart can actually close that gap. You know, think back to, you mentioned Mick O'Dwyer. But Mick O'Dwyer took over Laois, and, you know, Laois weren't in any great shapes. And, you know, he made some headway with Laois. Páidí O'Shea took over Westmeath, another great example. So obviously Louth's main agenda would be to win a Leinster title. And hey, you never know. And it would be great for the game.
Yeah, I suppose it probably would. I mean, I don't know. As long as they celebrate in Louth anyway, and don't trickle down here or anything like that. But
well, if I was from Louth, I'd be going up and down O'Connell Street and Grafton Street celebrating. So
I'll tell you, they'd probably go to Meath and celebrate anyway. I can assure you that. Anyway, they definitely go there and celebrate just to rub it in a bit.
It goes back to the parish rivalry. If you didn't have that, you know, you don't have anything. So that's why, you know, the fundamentals have to be kept in place. You know, you need the parish rivalry at the end of the day.
Perfect, Paul. Well, cheers for coming on anyway. And yeah, definitely what we'll do anyway, if Mayo do beat Tipperary and Dublin beat Cavan, which I think everyone expects, then, you know, we'll definitely do something around the All Ireland final anyway. And yeah, of course, I'll link down Gurtha 47 as always. And yeah, cheers for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, Aaron. I really appreciate being on the show. Obviously, I hoping to be on again because of a Mayo victory. It's 2020. Who knows what's going to happen? Obviously, I'll have to back our boys all the way, and I'll be sending you a few little gifts in there to GA Fan TV studios there in the north side of Dublin. So keep an eye out for that. And listen, man, it's been great. It's great chatting to you again. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, Aaron, the very best luck against Cavan.
Thanks. You know, I think we'll definitely need it, you know, in terms of you know, getting an extra few 10-15 points or something.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. You never know. As I said before, definitely. Hopefully it is, you know, somewhat competitive anyway. And sure, look, listen, if Cavan beat Dublin, then I don't know. I don't know what would happen, to be honest. I might need to go on the missing list for a while.
Listen, it'll still be news. There's something to talk about, you know?
Yeah, definitely.